When we think of Anne Boleyn, we often picture her tragic end, a queen executed on the orders of her own husband, Henry VIII. Her story is one of ambition, passion, and a spectacular fall from grace. But to view Anne's legacy as simply a cautionary tale is to miss the far more profound and lasting impact she had on English history. But before we begin, don't forget to like and subscribe to help us grow our channel. Her influence didn't end on the scaffold. It was just beginning. It lived on, breathed, and ultimately thrived in the long, prosperous reign of her daughter, Queen Elizabeth I. Anne Boleyn was more than just a queen. She was the catalyst for one of the most significant moments in British history. Her marriage to Henry VIII triggered the English Reformation, severing the nation from the Roman Catholic Church and setting England on a new, independent path. Yet, paradoxically, her most enduring influence came not from her life, but from her death. The very circumstances that led to her execution, a king's desperate need for a male heir and a court's political machinations, would cast a long shadow over her daughter's life, shaping her character, her decisions, and her destiny as England's most celebrated monarch. The Ghost in the Machine, Anne's legacy in Elizabeth's childhood. To understand Elizabeth I, you must first understand the perilous world she was born into. At just 2 years old, she was declared a bastard, stripped of her royal title, and all but erased from the line of succession. This was a direct result of her mother's execution for treason and adultery. Elizabeth's early years were a masterclass in precarity. She lived in a constant state of uncertainty, forever aware that her life and her legitimacy were tied to the whims of her powerful, volatile father. She was a constant living reminder of her mother, a specter in the Tudor court. This childhood wasn't defined by a mother's love, but by her absence and the stigma attached to her name. It was an incredibly difficult environment, but it forged in Elizabeth a steely resolve and a sharp intellect. She learned to be cautious, to be self-reliant, and to understand the political currents swirling around her. She was a keen observer, and she watched as her half-siblings, Edward VI and Mary I, struggled with the very religious and political turmoil that had its roots in her mother's ascension. This harsh start to life, a direct result of her mother's fate, would serve as the ultimate education for a future queen. Religious upheaval and Anne's enduring ghost. One of the most profound ways Anne Boleyn's life shaped Elizabeth's reign was through religion. Anne was a fervent and outspoken proponent of the Protestant Reformation. She introduced Henry VIII to the ideas of reform, and her marriage itself was the very embodiment of the break with Rome. As a result, Elizabeth was raised and educated in a Protestant household. Her faith wasn't just a personal choice, it was part of her identity, inextricably linked to her mother's legacy. When Elizabeth ascended to the throne in 1558, England was a country torn apart by religious strife. Her half-sister, Mary VIII, a devout Catholic, had attempted to reverse the Reformation, leading to the brutal persecution of Protestants. Elizabeth, learning from the bloodshed and instability of her siblings' reigns, embarked on a middle-ground approach. She established the Elizabethan religious settlement, a carefully crafted compromise that aimed to bring peace to a fractured nation. It blended Protestant doctrine with certain Catholic traditions, creating a new, uniquely English church. This policy was a direct response to the religious turmoil that began with her mother's marriage and continued through her siblings' reigns. Elizabeth understood that to rule successfully, she had to navigate a landscape shaped by her mother's religious revolution. She knew firsthand the dangers of religious extremism, a lesson learned from the very political and religious forces that had seen her mother condemned. Don't forget to like and subscribe to help us grow our channel. The Queen's image, Elizabeth's public persona as a response to Anne Boleyn's reputation, was a complex mix of ambition, sensuality, and cunning. Her enemies portrayed her as a manipulative, even bewitching figure who seduced the king. This image, a narrative created to justify her execution, would be a constant point of reference for Elizabeth. Elizabeth I carefully crafted her public persona to be the antithesis of everything her mother was accused of. Where Anne was seen as sexually ambitious, Elizabeth became the Virgin Queen. Her decision to never marry was a stroke of political genius. It allowed her to use her single status as a diplomatic tool, flirting with foreign monarchs without ever committing to an alliance that might compromise her power. But it was also a powerful message to her people. She would not be undone by marriage. nor would she be accused of the same crimes that led to her mother's downfall. She was wedded to England and England alone. Furthermore, Elizabeth projected an image of divine authority and purity. She was Gloriana, the mother of her people, and her image was carefully managed through portraits and public appearances. She was always the mistress of her own narrative, a skill she had to develop in a court that had once so easily destroyed her mother's reputation. The cult of the Virgin Queen was a brilliant way to rise above the shadow of her mother's supposed promiscuity and betrayal, and to build a new, unassailable foundation for her reign. A Tudor legacy defined by a Boleyn. While Anne Boleyn's life was short and tumultuous, its ripple effects were felt for generations. Her marriage to Henry VIII ensured the survival of the Tudor dynasty. Without Anne, there would have been no Elizabeth, and England's golden age might never have happened. Anne's influence extended beyond Elizabeth's personal life and religious policy. It shaped the very destiny of the English nation. Elizabeth's reign solidified England's new Protestant identity. Her successful defense against the Spanish Armada in 1588 was not just a military victory, it was a symbolic triumph of a Protestant nation against the Catholic world. This religious divide, which was the very reason for Anne's rise, became the defining characteristic of England's foreign policy for centuries to come. Ultimately, Anne's death was intended to erase her from history. Henry VIII hoped to move on, to forget the queen who had given him a daughter but no son. But the execution of a queen for treason and adultery, a trial widely considered a sham, ensured that her story would never be forgotten. Instead, it became a powerful, cautionary tale that her daughter would internalize and use to her advantage. Elizabeth learned from her mother's mistakes, or more accurately, from the mistakes her mother was accused of. She learned to control her image, to play the political game with ruthless precision, and to navigate a world where a woman's power was always in question. The lasting impact. Anne Boleyn's lasting impact on English history is not found in the portraits or monuments dedicated to her. It's found in the legacy of her daughter. The woman who brought about the English Reformation and gave England one of its most remarkable monarchs did not live to see her daughter's triumph. She died a disgraced queen, but she left behind a legacy more powerful than any she could have imagined. The shadow of Anne Boleyn's life and death shaped every aspect of Elizabeth's reign. It defined her childhood, informed her religious policies, and inspired her public persona as the Virgin Queen. In a final, beautiful irony, the king who so desperately wanted to forget Anne Boleyn instead gave the world an extraordinary queen who would go on to be celebrated as one of England's greatest rulers. Anne Boleyn's legacy is not one of tragedy and failure, but of profound and enduring influence, a testament to the powerful, lasting impact of a woman whose life and death set a nation on a new course. Her story is a reminder that sometimes the end of a story is just the beginning of a far more incredible one. Don't forget to like and subscribe to help us grow our channel. Thank you for watching, and ring that bell to receive notification on new videos.